Hello, welcome back to Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching. This is Erin. And today I have a special guest on the podcast. I have taken his course, gosh, was it last year? So long, it feels like so long ago. But it
February.
was very, very impactful for me. And I introduced his assistant a couple of months ago, Margaret Goodspeed, and that was an amazing interview. And so I'm super happy to have Daniel Wicker on the podcast. Hi, Daniel.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yes, yeah. So it's a long time waiting, but we finally made it happen. You've been so busy with your courses. How many have you done now?
Since we saw each other in February, I was in Austin, Texas. I got to come back home to Asheville and do one here. I was just in upstate New York, and then I am getting ready to head out to Chicago in a couple weeks.
Oh, cool. When's Chicago?
Mid-August, so I guess a little bit longer than a couple weeks. I've got a good month, I think, before I'm heading out that way.
That's good. So you have a chance to kind of decompress and like settle in. And I'm sure there's plenty of clients that still want to work with you.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully there's some decompressing in there. I think I'm gonna start getting ready for next year and yeah, take care of my locals and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. From someone who went through your course, I really adored your curriculum. Really love the compassion that you brought and the safety as a masculine presence. And so, the listeners of my podcast might actually be a little bit familiar with you because I talked about you a couple of times. But for those of my listeners who are not familiar, would you mind introducing yourself, kind of what you do, and like how your journey began?
Yeah, so my name's Daniel. I go by my first and middle name, Daniel James. There's many profiles on the internet, and the one that I did not attach my last name to on Facebook is the one that blew up. So you might see me as Daniel James or Daniel Wicker, Daniel James Wicker. And My current brand and sort of manifestation of my work is Totality Healing Arts. And I have been a bodywork practitioner specializing in fascial bodywork. I originally started with my first teacher was an old Rolfer who was back there in the 70s in the Tom Meyer days at the early Structural Integration Institute. And I have been a craniosacral therapy practitioner, a somatic body worker, and really, I think that the work is so much more than just the manual therapy. I really, really like to focus and bring people deeper into their own perception and awareness. And touch and physicality and embodiment is just one way that we can work with the body's intelligence. So I have been on my journey as a body worker since about, I think 2011, 2012 is when I started really dabbling in my first few workshops, was introduced to my first teacher. I shared with all of you in class some stories about him and those that have been exposed to my work and my advertising. I start pretty straight because the first time I saw him work, I had never even had a quote unquote massage before. And I walked into the room and it was like the exorcism. And I had no idea, no framework for that touch could be something that could impact people so profoundly. And I was hooked from that moment. And then went through the motions and went through massage school and was a little younger and fiery during massage school and was like, what are these people teaching? Where's the magic and the mystery and the intimacy and all the things I had learned with my teacher directly. But got my piece of paper and went on and where I'm based in Western North Carolina, so Asheville, North Carolina, and the surrounding mountains. Opened up my own studio right away, went into business for myself, and grew that to a little wellness center that kind of organically grew from one office over the 4 years to four or five offices, 15 therapists, a receptionist, all of that stuff. And that was really my first incarnation of my bodywork journey was the out of school into self-employment and building a sort of collective of practitioners. And then there was the COVID arc, which toppled that like a house of cards and
Yep.
which was actually in 2020 hindsight. Ha, funny, right? 2020 vision, right? Hindsight, 2020, 2020. I'm so thankful for that because I really was still running from a lot of the trauma that surfaced for me during that first part of my career. And I was overworking myself at the massage studio, surrounded by the support that I could have used to work on my own stuff. But instead, I worked 50, 60 hours weeks and kept building this house of cards of the massage studio. And so, thank you, COVID. I'm so grateful for that period because everything shut down and I was really given a space to turn inwards and start working both physically. My body has been through so much change and transformation. You wouldn't recognize me if you saw the pictures of me before because I look like, my frame has just changed so much in that time. And then also, I finally started to integrate because I had some early experiences with the work that took me, like the cork came out of my own somatic emotional release process, and a bunch of stuff came out after that cork pop. And I had to really kind of wrestle with some, childhood stuff for the first time. But I took that year or two off. And when I came back, I was so much more resilient in my body and my nervous system. And where I used to, I developed my sensitivity for this kind of subtle body work through my own pain. So I had the difficulty setting turned up on max, and I was listening to this like subtle whisper of the body's intelligence with the fire
Mm.
alarm 24/7 of my own pain sort of screaming. Which in hindsight, again, like, wow, that's pretty cool that I learned how to find that subtlety through all of that. And so when I started finally correcting my own self physically and, the internal wiring, I came back to my practice in like 2022 or 2023, and I was like, whoa, my sensitivity is like through the roof. The training weights have finally fallen off, and now I can feel so much more. And that's really when, I would always, the somatic work is such a huge part of my story. But it was really then that my capacity to take people there was so much quicker and deeper and faster. So coming back to the practice after the COVID hiatus of a few years, really working on myself, my sensitivity, and my ability to hold people in that place and bring them deeper just started going through the roof.
Yeah,
And
so your the internal volume of your own traumas and like unregulated nervous system, so on and so forth, was turned down. And
yeah.
then in the meantime, you had been building up this skill set because it's like hard to hear, but you wanted to, be in service to others. So then when that volume was turned down, you already have this sensitivity built up that's turned up. So then it's
hmm
like all of a sudden superpowers.
Yeah, yes. The contrast was like really apparent after the break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
So, your own process, like, how did you notice that you changed? Because your interoception, like, sort of started heightening. Just for an example, I remember the day when it was like Christmas Eve or something. And yes, I was working on Christmas Eve because I was also a workaholic. And I was working with one client and I was trying to get her traps to release. And logically, I thought, okay, we'll press into the muscle and but I started listening to my intuition just that one moment. And then all of a sudden I dropped in. All this information just became very apparent to me. I saw her body, I released in a particular order, and then boom, like her neck was healed. And that
mm
was just me. Again, maybe it was like me turning down my volume and then turning up the volume of intuition. So,
mm.
like, did you notice like little improvements or just like different things along the path that gave you little markers like, yes, keep on the path?
Yeah, yeah, and it's really what I teach people now. The fascial body work is one degree of palpatory depth, right? And for anyone who's not a body worker, palpation is the touch, basically. And that gives you one feedback mechanism. So, like as you learned in my class, going deeper into those tissue barriers really gets us into that myofascial connective tissue, the unwinding sensation that people feel of things reorganizing in space and time. And then also with the craniosacral, zooming out to float on the surface to be able to feel those internal ebb and flows of the cavity expansion and contraction. So it's like with less of your own junk in the way to listen through, there's less distortion there, and you're able to, because it wasn't just my nervous system being dysregulated, it was a lot of physical pain. I mean, they're both and that's really what we're coming to find regardless of the endless debate of whether the body keeps the score or not, which I think is just totally ridiculous because it's a living feedback mechanism. They're both influencing each other. But we really don't need to keep splitting hairs on whether it's in the mind or in the body because somebody who's extremely internally dysregulated and traumatized probably has tissue that reflects that, and somebody who has been really, really deeply injured physically can also have the stress and the discomfort and the identification with the injuries end up affecting their mental health in ways that are not ideal. So I don't really like to look at the split, but for me it was a combination of the physical pain being very loud and the internal dysregulation. I've done so well. I think back like even 5 years ago or gosh, 10 or 15 years ago, how much the spastic ADHD, I joke in my classes, I'm like, okay, so you guys are going to see not so much the Zen mode I go into when I'm in a quiet room treating one person, but the like spastic golden retriever who's super excited to share information with you and just can't wait to make you happy and teach you stuff. And I still fidget, I touch things all the time. I'm very, like kinesthetic and I'm stimming all the time and whatnot. But so both of those things got in the way of mapping out the person in front of me and listening to those
Mm,
feedback systems. So it's not that I wasn't already on the path, it was just that there was so much less resistance between my sensory apparatus and what's there for them. Um,
mm.
and I don't know if that does that really answer your question, or is there a different way to unpack that?
I think that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
So being able to pick up on the subtleties, could you describe a little bit of your method with the myosomatic work that you do? So, and having like taken the course, it there is such a quiet and a peace that comes over, and there's almost like for me, it was like a melting away of my psyche and then just accessing and heightening a different part of my brain, maybe the
Mhm.
insula,
Yeah.
and just like playing in that realm. So as a body worker, having taken your course, it was quite impactful. And the unwinding, like it was just like crazy because I just started seeing my classmates like
Yeah, just moving into the flow of reorganization. Yeah, so describing sort of the methodology or
yeah, the methodology, and I guess like what does it look like to get a session from you
yeah.
or like to be trained by you?
Yeah, yeah. So I always meet people where they're at, and if we're trying to paint a picture for everybody listening, that touch has we didn't go into detail, but talking about the first teacher, the exorcist, people have seen maybe on Instagram like big emotional catharses, screaming and crying, shaking and shuddering, and temperature changes, all sorts of strange physiological responses. That's possible, and the way to get there is a little nonlinear. And this is the challenge with, I think, validating it in the Western scientific and academic paradigms that want everything to be measurable and repeatable. We're going into very individualized processes with, a journey in front of us where point A to point B doesn't lead to the same thing every single time. We're really stepping into a place of listening and being
Mm,
aware of what the body and the tissue wants to do. But in general, I meet someone where they're at. And so someone might still be in the first category of like, well, I know Bodywork's good for manual therapy, pain, posture, performance. I want to feel better. I want to move better. I want to correct the posture so I don't keep injuring myself. And that's great because from a fascial perspective, being willing to feel their body and what's going on is going to help facilitate the work. We don't have to necessarily feel like we're threatening, hey, by the way, when I touch you, we're going to go straight to your childhood trauma. You don't have to do that. You can still enter into this paradigm and kind of bite off a little bit as you go. However, what we're finding with the fascia, and for me, it's an interesting thing because I followed all of this and intentionally for the bulk of my practice, I intentionally did not consume any external resources. I didn't read studies. People asked me about the books and have you seen this and have you heard this and what about this lecture? I said I'm not doing any of that. I want to push all that away because I
mm,
had this personal experience with my teacher where I saw him. It was his stillness and his sense perception. I wanted to double down and say, I'm taking all my mind out of the way and I'm channeling everything into my hands. And I want to listen as much as possible. I do my best to turn my brain off when I'm in session. So,
Yeah,
from an
same.
academic and a scientific paradigm, it's great that we have all this research, but I haven't followed this as an academic. I've followed the practice, and now reading and getting into some more of that left brain academic and research material. I tell the story based on trying to find the words for what I can feel with my hands. So some of it might be slightly off, or the way that I verbalize it. I might not have the academic language 100% down. However, if we talk about the experience, it seems to me that the biggest, well, not to say the biggest, but the first breakthrough in the fascial sort of research. And I think those first couple studies by Carla Stecco, and I always pronounce the name wrong. It's probably German or something, but Schleip or Schleip, I'm not exactly sure. But from the early 2000s to the 2000 teens, a lot of the research was about fascia in its structural capacity. So,
Mhm.
okay, wow, we weren't really paying attention to this. It's its own organ and it holds everything together, right? Everything else that we know and navigate bodies by, if we go into a hierarchy of order, fascia really is the ultimate container. So, whether we're going to manipulate bones or joints or muscles, we have to understand that there's a collagenous, elastic. I bring Jello cubes to class. I bring little weird sensory things that help you touch. It
Love,
really
I
is,
love the little toys in your course.
yeah.
It's great.
It's so important to touch things. The joke I make is that everything is floating in the Jello cube like Dwight's stapler in The Office, right? If you remember, people like The Office, and so you think of how if the Jello jiggles, what is contained within it will also jiggle. And so we have to understand that fascia is this collagenous, elastic wrapper around and through everything. It changes the way that we interact with those structures because the whole contains all of the parts, but all of the parts reflect the whole as well. And so, origins and insertions of muscle bellies and traditional musculoskeletal anatomy, like I kind of throw all of that away and I just get into the sensory aspect of what the tissue feels like. And we start to be able to identify density, where collagen and fascia has become dehydrated and no longer elastic.
Mhm.
And so, from a structural perspective, the biggest thing that the fascia paradigm does for the person who wants to experience it is it gives your body enough time to actually reform where it's been holding on. And so, whether it's a massage therapist or a PT or a chiropractor, the biggest problem with all the manual therapies in the industry is nobody's listening long enough to really understand what that body wants in that place at that time in terms of depth of pressure and how long it needs to feel safe before it will decide that it can come loose, right? It's not the paradigm we're taking people in is not here is a restricted held force within the body. I'm going to use my leverage and my power to overcome and force the change to happen. I'm going to manually correct this thing. It's not what we're doing anymore with the fascia work and the cranial work and the somatic side of things. It's all about bringing awareness and perception back, letting the body's hardware of sensation come back online and go, oh, wait a second, we're holding on here. We know what to do about that. We can start to relax and feel safe, go into parasympathetic nervous system, and that collagen will start to remodel and move and unwind. And that's what we feel as the practitioner. So, for somebody who wants to experience this and they're coming at that ground floor, they don't know much about the emotional release, they just want to feel better in their body, the fascia work is super helpful because it lets the body unravel at its own pace. And by going slower and taking the time, we actually get better results than people continue to go to their PTs. And I'm not saying those professionals are not good at what they do, but all manual therapies, people get in their head about the system that they've learned and they try to make the body in front of them look like it looks in the book and they try to
Right.
force things. So we're in a non-forcing paradigm where if we actually give the body enough time, it's going to remodel. Called the type 3 collagen in the fascia goes through a remodeling phase. It's like a thixotropy. And the practitioner feels that as the layers kind of like melting and dissolving and reorganizing underneath. Beyond that, the research that I think started in the late 20 teens into the 2020s is now more about the connection with the sensory apparatus. And so we're starting to realize that all of the most richly innervated parts of the body with the most nerve endings are in the fascia, and they respond to vibration and pressure and safety. And some of these things have already been mapped out, but it's a little bit, I think the fascial piece from a manual therapy perspective, as being someone who's primarily worked fascia, there's some misconceptions around just what the recipe of someone actually letting go of tension in their body is composed of. Um, and so if we start to understand that as this structural sweater starts to move and redistribute, right? It's held on to something here. I've got a shoulder issue and it's so dense and tight it almost feels like cement. I've had it for 20 years. As I start to apply safety and awareness as the primary vehicle rather than forcing and changing, I'm going to feel exactly where the body's ready to release and meet it right on the edge of the tension. So that collagenous, elastic gelatin of the fascia is now saying, well, I can't receive you down here just yet. That's a little too much for me, but right, oh, that's the sweet spot. And then the release starts to happen, and we just follow the tissue as it redistributes, right? And so
Mm.
that's the structural piece. Like if you can imagine, and I see people on stage at like TEDx and like these really big educators and things. They're like coming to seminar with like the green man suit, that people wear at like tailgates and football games and stuff because it's stretchy and elastic. And they're saying, look, see, and that's just so funny to me because these metaphors and these like visual and tactile toys, they really do they really do a much better job of sitting here trying to explain what happens. But so that sweater is around everything, and it's all connected. As tension that was held here redistributes, the body's going to have to adapt and make space for all of that to occur. But at the same time, all of those, I think about it like Christmas lights or lights on a chain. As that tissue opens up, all of those little cell receptors and mechanoreceptors are now registering information and communicating to the brain as well. And so that is where, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but what we have identified, a lot of research connects the fascia to the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. And so we know that those regions of the brain have to do with emotion and memory. And so for me, it's so much easier to talk about, oh, I went and saw my teacher, and the lady had an exorcism on the table and went back to being 5 years old and said, Mommy and Daddy, it's stabby's hurting me. And of course, it was, 1960. So they said, we don't know what you're talking about. Go back and play with your dolls. And that was a big cathartic emotional release for her. It's way easier for me to start with the event of the emotional release that is sort of triggered by the right kind of touch and safety, and then theorize and hypothesize and say, well, whether there are certain regions in the brain that are being activated, or oh well, the brain keeps the score and the body's just the reflection of it, or the body keeps the
It's
score
all
and
connected. I mean, in Eastern
yeah,
philosophies and thoughts, it's like one and the same, and the
right,
definition, like they might even have some differential, but it's like it's really all connected. And it's like fascia, if you like cut a cadaver open and look, like the fascia doesn't look like anything. And in fact, they used to take it and just throw it in the garbage can,
yes,
as
yeah,
we
that's a
know.
big one that everybody's starting to get that. And that was like, 600 years of recorded medical history from like the early, beginnings of Western medicine. And I don't know if it's 600 years or not, but yes. And that's the hard thing about it is because it's everywhere and because it's through everything, when we segment things into boxes for our cognitive mind to understand it, it makes it really orderly for things like memorization and studying. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we lose something. And even Tom Myers, who I have so much respect for Tom Myers, and the body does, like you look at the meridians of Tom Myers' myofascial meridians. You could Google myofascial meridians or body trains, and you can see it's a great step in the direction of connecting chains and not
Yeah.
just isolating muscle origin insertion, chain, link, 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 link. Now we're starting to see these big sheets, but
Mm.
also it when you separate things in your mind, you don't see them as the whole interconnected thing in front of you. So when I have students come to class, I teach them to say these are much better lines than we had before. It's a much better map, but you know what? I used that map for the first 5 years of my career, and I did the long Rolfing strokes, the ironing out, or I like felt like I was a steamroller on people. And you can get and trigger that fascial thixotropy there. However, there will come a point where a person in front of you locks down and goes into resistance, and that stroke that you've been taught to follow the line isn't going to be therapeutically valuable for that person in that moment anymore. And you have to go off the road and adapt to what
Yeah.
is in front of you. And so this is where the images and the pictures and the little toys are so much better than talking about it. But rather than see someone like and follow these nice orderly lines of the body, which is a healthy, I've never seen a healthy, perfectly postured, balanced body in my life. I see the person who's like this and has been pretzeled up after 30 years or 40 years of tension. I need to map and identify what's in front of me. And so there are all these possible forces. When the forces come from the outside world, they don't care how nice and orderly the lines of the human body are. They introduce those shearing and torsion, bending forces, compression, elongation,
Yeah, it's
and the
more
body.
like spider or gossamer or spider web.
Yeah,
I guess nothing's gonna quite accurately describe it, but it's just
that's
like
why
if
we
a
have to
fly get
play
caught
with.
in a spider web or a gossamer, it'll kind of like it just pulls all the threads, it pulls all the threads, it pulls, and the entire structure changes.
Yeah,
And yeah, and another thing that you mentioned, obviously you're a man that can hold complexities, multiple complexities, multiple truths. And that's more of like Eastern way of thinking. Is it's more difficult to look at the totality of everything, especially in the West. It's just the left brain thinking of like, well, I want the answer and this is what it is, this is what it is.
yeah,
But like you said, in this work that you do, it's, A doesn't necessarily equal B equals C. It's going to be different every time because each person's experience is unique and
yeah.
their body expresses it in a unique way. So how long does the mapping take, Daniel, that you're doing?
Mm. And when you say mapping, like,
I mean, you draw a map on them. No, I'm kidding.
oh no, no, no. Like how long does it take for me to figure out what's going on in the person's body in front of
Yeah,
me?
exactly. With,
Yeah.
where you're at with your expertise. And because I saw you do it in the training, at least a
Mm.
bit, even though we were like switching partners and such. But like, how
Yeah.
long does that typically take for you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I put my hands on someone and right away the pattern is obvious. Usually the first session with somebody will be sort of I'll go on an investigative journey. I'll try to, you know, put an immediate fire out of pain or dysfunction where someone's experiencing an issue. But because everything is connected, whether it's that hip issue or a shoulder thing, I have found that you almost have to address all of the tissue in the body as a rule. I haven't met anybody yet that's just so hydrated and integrated that this doesn't apply to them. If they're out there, they probably aren't getting body work because they don't need it. But for most people, the pattern, like is something issue with the shoulder, it's all the way down into the forearm, into the fingers and the palm, and that shoulder's rotating and twisting. It's affecting the spine. Like there's no way around it because when we get into like locomotion and gait and biomechanics, like wherever there's restriction eventually exerts itself on everything else. So it's an
Exactly.
evolving
Your body's fighting
process.
itself.
Yeah, yeah, and that, the crick in your neck could be, throwing your movement off and you'd never realize it because your body tries to self-correct and
Yeah.
your proprioception and interoception turns off and you walk like this. I used to joke that my legs were like two tree trunks and I was just throwing them around in front of me with like no nuance, because they were that tight and that restricted. So, sometimes by the end of a session, I've got it pretty well mapped out. Sometimes, it takes a few to really get the picture clearer and clearer. And then there's times where I'm like, man, the body's taking me here. I'm navigating around where I feel density and laxity. I'm feeling collagen as the guarding when someone either doesn't feel safe or their body's resisting touch because it's not ready to receive. There's too much going on in there. It's doing its job, which is protecting more delicate structures from being disturbed. So if there's a hip with a knee, cross over to the opposite psoas and shoulder, all of those things are in the fascial jello at the same time, all saying, wait a second, don't tug me too far this way because I'm connected over here, and don't push me too far that way because now that's going to throw this off. And so, really, it is more of feeling people over time in their adaptive like evolution, and as things release, coming back to them and seeing how they change. However, this is also something that brings me to the somatic piece as well, is that sometimes I'll get stumped. Like I've been working with one woman, she's a lovely older retired woman, and we've been dealing with internal hip rotation being like inaccessible for her for such a long time.
Wow.
And we'll be working different parts of her body and feeling the connection. So when I try to go right into that hip, I usually don't make as much progress, or I get bounced out because of the guarding that's present there.
Mm.
Even when I use my subtlety and my safety and I'm waiting and patient, I get bounced out. However, it's when we work her right foot and her right calf and her right shin and the muscles in the peroneals and the gastroc and the soleus and the IT band, that when that starts to soften and release, she always feels it up in her abdominal area, her hip, and actually her T-spine starts to open. So when you
Mm.
find the dense parts of the body and you allow them to open, it's very non-linear where things start to move. My access point into that hip has been at the extremities, and when I really get it right, the whole torso starts to open up for her. She's breathing deeper. She's reporting all these sensations. But we just had a breakthrough. And I don't know if it's because I got supercharged at my last seminar and came back and was just, we've never talked about somatic work before. I just suggested, we've been working together for a couple years. You want to try the craniosacral? Because I'm feeling like that subtle, gentle touch might. And I was approaching it from a place of maybe I could get some little vertebrae shifts or her sacrum to kind of
Mm.
decompress a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was the gentleness and the safety. She started crying, and there was a lot of women in there. Like I see a retirement age community, and it's women in their 60s and 70s have so much unaddressed trauma from botched birth procedures, C-sections, abortions, things like that. And it was a lot of that stuff. And she just started crying and opened up. And she said, I've been worked on this for 30 years. I've seen therapists, I've seen pastors, I've gone and done it all, but there must be still something there because I don't know why. I just feel safe. I'm going to let this go. And so then I encouraged that process. And you know what? It was that exact spot her body brought me to that brought up the deeper emotional issue, and it was right in that place in her like iliopsoas and her right hip that I've been feeling this wall every time I would try to get it structurally, and we were able to push the boundary so much further into that internal hip rotation than we ever were before because it was the body was saying, there's this thing here that happened to me that I'm still protecting myself from. And it's not structural, it's not physical. I mean, it is, but the
Can you
root of it
feel
is
like
not.
in somebody, can you feel the density of energy when it needs to be released? Because I can look at people and I can see it. And
Mm,
that's a skill that I've developed over almost like 20 years. And it
mhm,
seems like you can feel it first rather than see it. So, what is
mhm.
it to the
Yeah.
best of your ability? Like, what does it feel like to you,
Well,
Daniel?
I made this joke in class, I think, because the women come in and they're like, I get downloads and I knew it was your grandma that was about to come through in the somatic work. And that's not my experience. I feel like the mole man from The Simpsons with the like super thick glasses. And I'm just like in a dark room and I'm like, hey, you want to help me feel this out? What are you noticing out there? It's like a Marco Polo or something in the pool, like Marco Polo, just like feeling my way through the dark. But I don't use energy language to describe it because it's the physical density of the tissue that I'm navigating. It's that sense of how restricted and dehydrated has this collagen matrix in the fascia gotten? How heavy is it? How dense is it? I
Okay, but
wanted
there's
to.
markers. There's a way to describe it for you, the density, the
Mhm.
dehydration,
Yeah.
so for me it's like, okay, I can kind of feel the energy flowing, but for you it's more, it's, I don't know, an area is stuck.
Yeah, I'm going into the most stuck stuff and trying to open it and get that flow back where I think
Gotcha.
sometimes there may be
Gotcha.
an opposite polarity with energy work or hands off the body work where there's more subtle things happening. But for me, it's very grounded, it's very physical, and I want to do a really deep dive into the fascia and the piezoelectrics and all that, but I haven't gotten the verbiage for it yet. But I feel into people's resistance. I feel into their stuckness. I feel into their heaviest, most dense places where the energetics are not maybe flowing as much. And then I wait
Mm.
and try to bring that sensation and awareness and activation back to them. But what I would say is that the tissue work, because of the way the fascia and the craniosacral, the cerebrospinal fluid work, they're two feedback mechanisms. And so I feel where things are stuck as opposed to where they're flowing. And if
Right.
I sort of, let's just say there's a big rock or a boulder here in somebody's shoulder, and I can't immediately get in there. So I'm now taking my hands further and further away, or with my client, this is the perfect example. That hip, I had to go further and further down the chain to find something that would let me in and start to feel safe enough to move it. If I was right on top of the bullseye, it was, don't touch me here. I'm not ready, bouncing me out. So, how
Right.
close can I get? Oh, here's an entry point. Let's work our way back. And so I follow, it's almost as if I'm tracing the lines around where that bullseye is and eventually getting it safe and supporting it enough from as many angles as possible to say, I got you. You're safe. If you want to let go of a little bit of this, I've already mapped out the other things that might be in conflict or resistance, or the body's just going to try to protect itself. And so the shoulder, the hip, everything else is in suspension or counterbalance. And so as one
Mhm.
thing releases, I've got to be willing to go and chase it around and, you know, um, kind of nudge. It's like if there was a big knot here, sometimes you pull both sides of the knot, it tightens the knot down. So you've got to kind of
Yeah.
push it from other sides, slowly tease out the threads. You've got to be willing to get non-linear with your work because that whole origin and I'll just rub along the muscle belly. I've had some people who are in that medical physical therapy paradigm who they don't necessarily want to be, but when they get clients, they're prescribed body work and they can only touch the area of prescription. When you understand how fascia works, there's no you realize how boxed in you are by the thinking of
The
this
limitation.
linear. Yeah, it's so
I have a
crazy.
friend who's she's a DO and medical doctor, and she said, Erin, I went to medical school to get freedom. She's like, I feel like I have a leash because
Yeah,
I know what the answer could be for this person, and I'm not allowed to address it. And I was like, phew.
yeah. And the physical tissue reflects the nervous system as well. It reflects the inner process. And so some part of that journey of identifying where's the spot is in that somatic dialogue now because my touch
Yes,
is not trying to force things to change. It's bringing awareness back. And so the other part of that is because of the medical paradigm, people are taught that their inner subjective experience is meaningless because it can't be found under a microscope or chopped into little bitty pieces and validated and affirmed by peer review. When you actually empower them to say, tell me what you're noticing, what does that feel like? And they go, oh, this is really strange, but like something in my left ribs is now I'm noticing something happening there. We're plugging them back into that interoception. And so, as the
yeah,
therapist, if I'm willing to go find and follow that, it unlocks that next angle of trying to tease the knot out. And it would never have been apparent based on necessarily what I'm feeling on the body. Because I'm plugged in, let's say, to that leg and hip, and they start going, actually, it's over here. This is the next tug in the line. This is the next knot in the chain. And we work over there for a bit and go back. And now all of a sudden we break through those barriers even deeper. So
yeah.
this non-linear way. And then the other part of it that I want to communicate, I know we're covering a lot of ground. I hope we're not going for your people
I'm
because
like, let him
we
rip. Let her rip.
we've both done the work and we've been in the room where it's happening. So I hope just anyone out there who doesn't know what's going on, just come to our classes and we'll
Yeah,
let you
exactly.
know.
You have to take the course
You
now.
got to you got to
Just
play with the
sign up.
gelatin. You got to stick your hand in the goo. You got to work on some people's bodies.
I like the stretchy guy, the Stretch Armstrong,
The
whatever.
stretch
That
Armstrong.
was
Yeah.
fun.
I'm gonna ask. Oh, I'm getting sidetracked here, but so before I lose my place here, the other piece of it is that somatic emotional release part. So we're talking about the way that we approach where the restrictions in the body are very nonlinear. As we touch, we also wake up the feeling sensory capacity of the body. People
Mhm.
go, wow, I'm noticing things now. How did you find that? Wow, this is connected to that. Let's go explore that. They're starting to learn to trust their body in real time. Wow, the things that I feel are important and meaningful. And it really just helped my therapist unlock something for me. I'm going to practice validating my own sensory awareness without an expert to tell me because it was on an MRI, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's the most important part in the transition from the physical body work to the somatic work. And following my client's experience with the scar tissue and the pregnancy stuff being the piece, it was like when her awareness, her sensory capacity, her interoception, right, was able to locate, here's the spot, and she could move my hand to exactly where she was feeling it. That's when now that's the bullseye. We've woken up the body's capacity to feel what's going on in here. Oh, it's right here. Daniel, bring your hand right here. Okay, let's see what happens now. Stay with this spot that your body has identified as the most loud thing, the most verbal feedback. Let's go here. Stay with that. Stay with that. What do you notice? What do you feel? And then all of a sudden, now we get that transition over from the sort of like quantitative, where is it? How deep? What's it connected to? Interoception, fascia, to now we're getting into that connection to regions of the brain related to emotion and memory. And as I say, oh, that bullseye spot we found, what's that like now? People will start to say, "Ah, it just feels some sort of way now. Like, I don't know why, but it's this. I feel anxious about it or frustrated or
Your
I'm
awareness is drawn to it now, and you can actually feel what's underneath there. Yeah.
yeah, I'm having a memory, and this is a silly metaphor I always come up with, but for me, like something that comes back as like a visceral childhood memory is like my grandparents' shag carpet. And I was born in the 80s. We didn't have shag carpet anymore. It's like a relic from a time gone, but there have been times where that shag carpet starts to come up, and there's a memory there for me that like it starts as a sensory body awareness and when you focus there. So this is kind of where I also say the work, this kind of somatic body work, it's like a meditation cheat code. And people who struggle to access those unconscious blockers that they're working through within themselves, the sensation just brings you there without all this chatter. It's like, here's the mantra is right here. My hand on your shoulder is the mantra. Let's say it together. And it's
Yeah.
just being in the body awareness of it. And that's what tends to be like, it steeps them in it long enough for the brain. I think, and I'm not qualified enough to talk about this, but if it's mirror neurons or just brain region bleeding over or just, I'm not sure. But the prolonged sensory awareness activation gives the body mind more time to figure out what else is there. And that's when the bigger stuff starts to come up for people. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure to tie that together before we got too far, but yeah.
You've mentioned safety quite a few times. I think you said
Mm,
it like 3 or 4 times. And, I've been doing a deep dive into deification. So, like when we're children or when we're babies, we're like in the womb, all of our needs are taken care of like that. And then we are birthed into the world, and our parents at some point are going to, I mean, they're going to fail us, right? Because they're
yeah.
human, they're not a god.
Hmm.
And I wonder, like, some of the work that you're doing is because you are adjusting to exactly what the person needs in real time. And
Mm,
there's such a spiritual aspect to that, almost like helping them to make connection with God in a
mm,
way, like
mm,
holding that space, like adjusting to their needs. And that's something that's, a huge part of like the work that I'm doing. Like, since I've learned from you, I am one of those people that goes in deep. But I
mm,
have people breathe and I have people draw awareness to the area. I have to say, though, the work that you taught me that I learned from you, I work with the nervous system more. I'm getting back into some of my original roots, which was
mm,
craniosacral.
mhm,
And it's like when people draw their inner awareness on inside of them, it's like that light starts to turn on. Like, this is so in alignment with a lot of the things that I know about yoga is actually the practice of being present. And when you're holding people in different ways, like you're being so present with them, you're gathering information, your brain is heightened, your sensory abilities are heightened, and that person's sensory abilities are heightened. There's definitely some magical stuff that I know that you've experienced, that I know that
Yeah.
I've experienced. Like, just to share, I had a client who I just noticed him getting more and more stressed. Every yoga session, he would come in. By the end, he was better. And the last session that I did with him, he's 84. I said,
Mm.
I'm going to hold your head and I want you to breathe and just let go of the next thing you have to do. And I just, for like 20 minutes, and this is very not typical. He's very much get the things on the checklist done. But like by taking that time, and you said a key thing, it's like this gives the tissue and the fascia and like all the sort of chemical processes and quantum processes to like have the safety and have the presence to then be able to melt and restructure.
Mm.
And it takes a lot of, I think, inner discipline and awareness and practice to be able to provide that for people. So it's very unique and very rare, I would say. So you have that part of you. And I know we've been talking, it's like, oh, over an hour. So I want to talk about one or two more things
Yeah, sure,
more
sure,
related
sure.
to your course. So the course that you're teaching now is 5 days. For next year, is it still 5 days?
Yeah, I'm gonna continue doing it that way. People have asked me to break it up, but I'm a big picture guy. I want to show you the intersection of these things, and I don't see how I could do it any other way. But it'll be 5 days still.
5 days. Cool.
Mhm.
And what is your website that people can reach out to you and register for your courses? And then also your socials.
Yeah, so Totality Healing Arts on Instagram, Facebook. My personal Facebook, I'm probably the most active. That's Daniel James. And then the website is b.totalityhealingarts.com/certification. And that should be the most direct. I've got to do a major overhaul on my website and everything. So find me however you can find me. And well, I'll give you a link you can put in the description of the podcast too, maybe.
Yeah, we'll put all those links in the notes for the podcast. So, so one more thing. What is your favorite part about the education piece of this?
Hmm.
Because when you're a practitioner, it's different than when you're educating. And I know that from also being a practitioner and then educator, there's certain like different parts of your brain that fire off. And being able to hold space for, okay, I'm going to hop into practitioner mode where I'm demonstrating and like tapping into those subtleties, but then also like commanding the room. Like, what's your favorite part about doing these courses now and educating?
Yeah, well, they're extremely influential over my own awareness. The amount of learning I do in teaching is like exponential because now there's, 15 to 20 people in the room rather than just the one. I still like to do I think a lot of my best work, the unit of measure is one person, like with a very thorough, deep transformation. I think I will be called back to that work more, but the classes is what have really been asked for of me. And so I'm delivering what the universe is asking for. People want education and I'm giving them education. But now my awareness grows through noticing instead of one person's body and the nonverbal communication their body's giving me, some of the verbal dialogue, now I'm seeing that process like exponentially through other people. And so there's something I talk about from the very beginning of the class that we're talking about body work and manual therapy, but yeah, I think I did preface this at the beginning, and there's a way deeper rabbit hole. If you ever want to go down it, sometime we can talk about that too. But really, the skill set we're training underneath everything else is our perceptual awareness, our sensory awareness, our own embodiment. I'm not going to be a somatic bodywork educator forever. I'm already planning my escape into the next octave. I don't know if it'll take 5 or 10 years, but like the biggest thing that I want to hit home to people about is the body's somatic intelligence is so much more powerful than everyone has given it credit for, because of this, however long you want to, thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever, conceptual, mind-based, um, paradigm where everything is thoughts and thinking. Thoughts and thinking are almost meaningless compared to how deep your true all cylinders firing, interoception, proprioception, listening, seeing, like fully turned on human beings. I don't mean that in a sexual way, but fully alive human beings,
Right alive.
the access to information that you have through your sense perception is infinitely more dense than what you can learn from a textbook, even if you go to the most prestigious universities for however long. I'll die on this hill forever because as somebody who has this in their body, in their type, if I look into all my birth charts, everything, the astrology, the human design, everything else, I am a somatic body-based intelligence. I don't know how I know what I know. I feel it in the moment, and then there's just this vast library of information that comes out, and I can't explain it to you 100% of the time why that happens, but I know that mostly because of the ways that that gift has misfired and it's been shut down in school with teachers, with authority figures. The authority paradigms are breaking. And so, what I notice in classes as opposed to doing the one-on-one body work is that that mechanism, the deeper skill underneath the skill, is like absorbing so much more information from each
Mm.
individual person, from the room as a whole. And as I teach and transmit my touch and I get better and better at articulating that to get the lights to turn on for somebody even faster. I'm super excited to see because this education that I'm offering, it represents like 15 years of my own continuing education, like tens of thousands of dollars at 3 to 4 different big schools that do bodywork continuing ed, and I'm distilling it down into a 5 day week, and I'm not leaving anything behind. Like the I don't know, the exponential transfer of the awareness in the moment is like the classes are just like accelerating that process like hugely. So
Now, are you going to be doing I was going to say part two, like a movie, but
yeah,
like an advanced?
I would like to. Yeah, I have to sit down and like that part takes longer for me a little bit because if I just everyone showed up in the room and let me wing it, that'd probably happen a lot faster, but to actually sit down and put the slides together and submit it to the accreditation people and do the research, that's a very slow process for me. So that may be the catch 22 of all this somatic sensory stuff I'm excited about is, I mean, my left brain moves a lot slower. So it
Me
might
too.
take me the winter before I'm ready for that. But I hope at least by the end of 2027. If not, I'll be really fresh to do it. If I could put it together the end of this year, early next year. But I would absolutely, because there's so much more. We talk about the myofascial unwinding when people do go into the big catharsis, slowing that down and like fine tuning it.
Well, the
Assisted,
hands-on was my favorite part, like getting worked on, and I
yeah.
had a big catharsis, which I had shared in our group
Oh,
after
cool, great.
5 days of doing that work with you. So
Hmm.
I'm just excited to have lots of partners to practice with and meet people. I mean, just that in itself is worth it. But yeah, certainly the education and building upon what you've already taught is
Mm.
priceless. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, there's so much more to get into, and I'm not exactly sure how it will go just yet, but I plan to keep going, and I'd like to build all the OGs have passed. John Barnes passed away, Eric Dalton's passed away. We still have Tom Myers for now, but there's definitely a big space in the fascia and somatics that everyone's being turned on to, and so I wanna continue to see where this will go.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for filling in the gaps. And thank you so
Hmm.
much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat
Of
with me.
course.
We've been planning this for months. So happy that it worked out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And for those of you who want to connect with Daniel, either about his courses or private work, again, we're going to have all of the links in the show notes, and you can find him on socials as well as on his website. So thank you so much, Daniel. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Erin.
Take care.